Hello. I'm excited to be giving an overview reading today where we're going to look at the surface of your chart. We'll be looking at the type and definition, and we'll look at the centers and cover the themes of the centers, and then we can go into the channels and perhaps touch on variable and incarnation cross. This is the surface because this is about what we have conscious access to, what comes out. Human design is very deep. It goes below the surface into things like the color, tone, and base, which is all below the line level. So when we're talking about the surface, we're starting with the synthesis, which is the type, which is how your entire design comes together at a mechanical level, how it expresses itself through aura. And then we can look at the lines as well, which are characteristics, and gates, the gates and lines, and the channels they form. You're a generator. The generator is the life force of the world. The sacral center is the center of fertility. It is the center of the energy that is available to do things, to commit to things, to commit to life. You have a strong sacral energy that is connected to your root, which is quite a packed root with 6 activations. And the root is where we have a certain fuel, you could say. People who have defined root and who have root activations have certain fuels that other people want. For instance, you have gate 58. This is a logical fuel. So someone who has the 18 but lacks the 58, they're going to be looking for it. That 58 is in demand. And then you have 38 is an individual fuel. And 54 and 19 are tribal. And you also have the individual format channel, the 360. That is the source of all individual circuitry. So in human design, there are 3 main categories of circuitry, of channels. There's individual, tribal, and collective. And they each have certain qualities to them. Certain qualities and certain associations. The individual is about empowerment. It's about being personally empowered. Its obligation is to make sure others don't interfere with it. The tribal is about support, and it's obligated to support. It's about needs, and making sure needs are met. And then the collective is sharing, and the collective is split between the logical and the abstract. The logical shares its formulas, its patterns, its predictions, and the abstract shares its experiences. Either sharing the experience with someone else while you're having it, like going on an adventure together, or sharing memories of that experience and sharing what you've abstracted away from it. Since you have the 360, this deeply mutative channel, this individual format channel, called the channel of mutation, that channel is going to dominate your chart. That's going to give your overall chart a strong individual bent. And so understanding what individuality is will be very important for you because it can help you understand the dynamic of your design and how it expresses itself. When you have a format channel, it really becomes the main frequency that you express in your aura, and actually it affects other people quite a lot, quite strongly. So the 360 is the individual format channel. There are only 3 format channels. They're the 3 channels between the root and the sacral. And the individual format channel, which is also part of your incarnation cross, your personality sun is in gate 3, and your design sun is in gate 60. That's going to be a key theme in your life. You know, the individual, it's about change, it's about mutation, it's about bringing something new into the world. And one of its themes is melancholy. And this is melancholy when the change doesn't come. It's melancholy waiting for the change. So everything individual is on a pulse, and it's either on or it's off. And that mutation is either happening or it's not. And you can think of it like you're just going along and nothing's happening and there's no change, and you're just yearning for and waiting and wanting. All individuals are wanting something to change. I mean, and once it changes, and once you have that innovative, creative burst, you bring something new into the world, it's not like you're going to stick around to maintain that. That's the role of the tribal and the collective. They're the ones who maintain. You know, the individual. It was, you know, you create fire, and then you go and you know, maybe you tell people, look, here's the fire I made, or maybe they just notice because it's not about telling or sharing with them. And then it's up to the tribe to keep the fire going, and it's up to the collective to figure out how you did it and to kind of, you know, universalize that. But it's the individual who brings everything new into the world. And there are no guarantees. People who have individual circuitry, they have a strong genetic need, or, you know, this feeling of, I need, you know, I'm looking for this change, for this mutation. They're so excited for anything changing. And life can get so boring. I mean, boredom is part of that same melancholic thing when the change isn't happening. You know, individual would be rather, they would be happier with the apocalypse than with nothing ever happening, because at least with the apocalypse, things are changing, you know. It's about bringing something new. And so much of the world, it just stays the same all the time, and there's no change. The individual is deeply mutative and has the power to change themselves and also to mutate others. And this is the term mutation, you know, it has certain connotations like cellular mutation, genetic mutation, but what it really means is transforming, is changing things. It's to be mutative is to really come up with something new. It's to take what's there and then somehow it changes in a certain way. And it's magical, and you don't always notice it. It's not even like you notice the time of mutation. It's more that you notice that it has mutated, it has changed. So the change itself is almost invisible. The individual circuitry, it gives a person the need to do something beyond just survive. It's different than integration circuitry, which is about survival and is also included as a type of individual circuitry sometimes, but it's different. So this 360, this channel of mutation, that's going to be a key theme that's going to inform much of your chart here, and it's going to essentially be an overriding theme in the feeling that you give to others. Now you also have the 4323, which is another individual channel. And that is nicknamed the freak to genius because it's the channel of structuring, which it's about structuring your thoughts, structuring your own unique individual ideas in a way that you can express them to others. It connects from the ajna to the throat. So the channel of structuring is about the struggle to express yourself, which is a struggle all individuals have, much more than someone who is collective or who's tribal. Now, obviously, all of us have gates or characteristics in different circuitries. But it's really the channels that define the life force. The channels are the life force. The channel is greater than the sum of its parts. So if you have individual channels, you're going to really have this strong individuality. And in fact, you have 3 channels, 2 of which are individual. And the third, the 3313, the channel of the prodigal, that's a collective channel. It's a collective abstract. But because you have this format individual energy, and because you have both the 360 and the 4323, individuality is going to be a primary theme for your life. And this struggle to express yourself to the tribe and to the collective, because the individual is dangerous to the tribe and the collective. The individual is mutative, it changes, it's not there to maintain tradition and nor to share per se, which is what the collective is interested in. The individual is about their own personal empowerment, and their empowerment can be threatening to the tribe and to the collective. So the individual is always suspicious to the tribe and the collective. They're suspicious because they're kind of outsiders who are unpredictable in a certain way. And they might go along and then totally surprise you because something new is happening and something's changing. So with that 4323, there's going to be a real theme of needing to find a way to express yourself in a way that others understand you. And that's simply not a dilemma that a very collective person would have, because the collective person is going to speak in similar ways to how others speak, and they're going to use common terms and common language, and they're going to talk about things that others can easily understand. The tribal person is not going to be as as oriented in that way, but the tribal person is going to maintain networks of support through touch, through handshakes and hugs and affection and all of this. But the individual is the one who really is challenged to express themselves in a way that they can express their own uniqueness, their own individuality. And this is the challenge of the 4323, because sometimes people won't know what you're talking about. They won't understand. And so this is why it's the channel of structuring, because it's about how do you structure things in a way that you can convey them to others. The individual is also highly auditory. Just like the tribe is about touch and the collective is visual, the individual is auditory. So it's very important to be heard, to feel that others are hearing you, that for an individual, communication, particularly spoken communication, is very important. So in a relationship, for instance, the individual is going to really value being able to talk to each other. A tribal person might be satisfied with a lack of communication as long as they have a certain amount of affection, or as long as they have a bargain that they've struck and that they feel they can trust the other. For trust is a very tribal thing, and fairness is very tribal as well. For the individual, there's no concept of fairness. But we all have so much conditioning, and the conditioning is something I'll go into in a moment. The conditioning is what pulls us away from ourselves. And strategy and authority is what realigns us with what we can trust inside of us. So being a generator, your strategy is to wait to respond. If you get up in the morning and you walk into the room and you say good morning to someone, they're not really going to hear you. They might not even notice. If you stand there silently and then they say, oh, and they notice you, and then you can respond. Or it's like you're walking up to a cafe to the barista to order a coffee, and they're doing something, and instead of saying, "Hi, I'd like a cup of coffee," you wait for them to notice you and to speak and to ask you if you'd want something. And these are small examples, but really the the generator's strategy of waiting to respond is a moment-to-moment thing. And when you're responding to others, you're being yourself. And they're going to listen to you and pay attention to you and give you a chance to express your individuality and a chance to express your own unique viewpoints. And when you're, initiating, which is essentially you're kind of cutting to them to the chase, then, well, that's going to pull you away from what you can trust inside of yourself. And what you can trust is your inner authority, which is the sacral. And the sacral center, it's either satisfied or it's frustrated. It's either in it or it's not really in it. And if it's in it, it's willing, if it's committed, if it's actually engaged, and if you've had a sacral response to something, then you will be able to stick through that frustration. But generators are the great quitters, and they quit when they've entered into something incorrectly. They've entered into a relationship or a job or a place to live or even a night out on the town or a lunch, anything big or small, and they were asked, "Do you want to do this?" And they said, yeah, of course I do. And that, yeah, that's not the sacral response. The generator says, "I love you," and you think, great, they love me, but do you really know? If you ask the generator, "Do you love me?" and they go, mm-hmm, then that's it. That's the sacral response, the uh-huh, or the or ugh, the sacral response makes all sorts of sounds. Not just mm-hmm and but those are common ones. But the sacral, it responds in sounds and it responds in expressions, and it's going to be, it's a feeling of being galvanized, of being vitalized, of this is activating me, and I'm feeling charged by this. And in not activating, see, that's the thing, there's all different kinds of activations. Not activating me in an emotional way, exciting me, or, in an ego way, making me competitive. No, it's this deep feeling, it's a feeling in the body of feeling engaged. You're engaged with that. And when it's not activated, when it's not there, you'll be disengaged. And when the going gets rough, you'll quit. Because that's what generators do. The sacral is what gives you the power to persevere, not to quit. If you enter into a relationship correctly or a job correctly, when things get rough, you'll have that energy. You'll have that power available. What the strategy and authority is doing is it's aligning you to your sacral energy so that you are able to know when you're really engaged and when your sacral itself is committing. And it's not a promise that you're making, which would be the domain of the ego. That's something that's funny. When you have undefined ego, you're not supposed to make promises. And so someone asked me, well, then, how is it with undefined ego? A generator asked, how is anyone going to trust me? And I said, well, they'll trust your sacral response. They won't trust you if they say, "Do you want to go to that movie?" And you say, "Yeah, sounds great." They're not going to trust you. Somewhere unconsciously, deep down, they're going to feel that fakeness. Because the undefined centers, we cover up our lack of definition with this sort of facade, and it comes across and people understand it as fake. And when you're really living yourself, when you're being yourself, when you're answering with sacral, that's the surprise there, is that, say you have to end a relationship. If you initiate and you start to give a lot of mental reasons, that other person is going to feel disrespected. But if they ask you, do you want to be with me? And you go, they'll accept it. There's something about the sacral response that people accept. They accept it because it feels authentic. It is authentic. They're experiencing your authentic being, and they feel respected because you're showing them your true self. It's so different than the homogenized world of mental rationalizations and mental reasons. How disrespected someone feels if you say, I'm so sorry, but this is how I feel, and this and that. And it's so different than if you wait and they ask you a question and you respond out of that sacral energy, that honesty, that truth that comes out from truly being you. But a lot of things are going to pull us away from that. I mean, it's a homogenized world, and so, I look at your chart and I see this definition, and I see this is how you're designed mechanically to differentiate in the world, that the more you live this, the more you become yourself in a way that's unpredictable even. It's an interesting thing that when I give human design readings, I'm talking in generics, and I'm saying, oh, the fourth line is like this, and the generator is like that, and this channel means this. And the truth is, the more that you live each part of you, the more that you decondition and that you follow that strategy and authority that wakes you up from the homogenized conditioning, the more you become different and unique and unpredictable, and some of the things don't actually apply, So I can give the generics and I can say how the mechanics work, but the truth is that each of us has tremendous potential to be so unique. Each of us, in that sense, has the potential for true individuality, whether or not we have individual circuitry in our chart. So there's so much that pulls us away. The generator is meant to wait to respond, and in your case, to trust sacral authority, which is your inner authority. And yet, everyone in our lives and the culture at large, our families growing up, our partners, everyone that we interact with, potentially pulls us away. And even the transits. Now, for generators, the people in their lives are going to affect them much more strongly than transits. Manifestors and projectors and reflectors, I would say manifestors and reflectors are affected more strongly by transits. Projectors and generators and the manifesting generators are going to be affected by the people in their lives, primarily. And so that's going to be the primary the primary influence that will potentially pull you away. And then the places where we're pulled away those places are the undefined centers. And in your case, being split definition, is going to be the bridging gates. So I want to go into those in a moment here. Split definition is an interesting dynamic. Split definition means that you have two different groups of centers that are in separate areas of definition. So you have the ajna, the throat, and the G center. And then those are split off from sacral and root. There's two primary ways to decondition when you have split definition. So the first is you no longer look for those bridging gates outside of yourself. Because the thing is, when you're split, there's going to be this strong conditioning pull that you need to have those things that bridge the split. This feeling of, I'm not complete if I can't bridge these two areas of myself. It's like being divided. So the first thing is to start to notice that you're looking for those things outside of you. And it's going to be the strongest pull. In fact, it's going to be this promise. this sort of feeling, this promise of, if I have these things, I won't be frustrated. If only, it's like the Holy Grail. If only I get these things. It's the Garden of Eden. It's the utopia. If only I get these things, I won't be frustrated. So that's the first part of deconditioning. And that's a continual thing. It's not like you just do it once. It's something that you become aware of, and you see how strong of a pull there is. I mean, this is such a powerful pull that it's always going to be there. It's like a magnet. It's just drawing you towards these things. And I'll go into those in a moment with the bridging gates. But then the second aspect of deconditioning, because I've heard from people who have split definition, and they say, for so many years I thought that that's what I needed. And I was looking for it everywhere. And finally I realized I have that in myself. Well, that's another trap, because you don't. You don't have those qualities in yourself. So it's a double deconditioning. It's first realizing I don't need to look for these things outside of me. And then second, realizing I don't need to look for them inside of me either, that these are not me. I don't have those bridging gates. Those bridging gates are not who I am. That's not self. It's the not self that pulls me towards thinking I need to have those, or I need to be those in the first place. So in your case, the bridging gates are gate 2, which is about finding a sense of direction and knowing where to go. Gate 34, which is about personal power and being able to use that power and exert that power, having power. And 57, intelligence, know-how, intuition. So again, thinking that there's this double conditioning. The first thing is, I'm drawn to people who have power, who have a little bit of almost machismo, who aren't afraid to exert their power, display their power. They have the energy to do things. They have the energy that's available, and it's an integration gate. So they know they have the energy to survive. And then 57, also in the integration, they know how to survive, and they're smart and they're intuitive. So I'm drawn to people who are intelligent. I'm drawn to people who have power. And then the 2, and I'm drawn to people who know where they're going and who are driven. So this would be the first thing, would be feeling like you need people who embody those resources in your life. Or that you're looking for someone who's intelligent, who's powerful, who's strong, and who's driven, and has that drive, and has that sense of direction. And then, of course, the second part of it is, I don't need to look outside of myself, because I have those things. I have that drive. I have that personal power. I have that intelligence. Well, of course, the joke is that you do. It's just not in that particular way. It's that you don't need to. That you don't need to be smarter than you are. You don't need to be more intuitive or identify as being a deeply intuitive person, because you're already intuitive enough. You don't need to have more strength or more power. You don't need to have more direction than you already have. These bridging gates, they trick the split definition into feeling that as long as you get those things, you can avoid frustration. And that's really it. If I get those things, I'll avoid frustration. If I can find that direction, I'll avoid frustration. If I can be strong, I'll avoid frustration. If I'm smart, I'll avoid frustration. So I'm going to be strong and smart, and I'm going to know where to go. That's the not self. That's the not self theme. I have to be strong, I have to be smart, I have to know where to go, and then I'll avoid frustration. all you have to do is wait to respond and trust yourself, trust what you can trust, your sacral authority. Trust that in that moment you will know the truth from your sacral response. It's a discovery process. Generators are here to know themselves, which means they're here to get to know themselves. We don't know ourselves by default. I'm a generator. I've been so surprised. Bands I thought I loved. Of course I love that band. Of course I'll go to that show. I love those guys, I love that band. And then someone actually asks me, well, do you like this song? And I go, yeah. That means no. It means no because there's no sacral power behind it. You notice this in your own voice when you respond. You notice it after the fact even. You are asked a question and you say, oh, yeah, of course. And then you realize, there was nothing behind that. I wasn't in it. I wasn't engaged. And then something else comes along. And do you want to do this? And it's, and then suddenly, so that's the thing is like, we're here to get to know ourselves. And not everyone is. Projectors aren't here to get to know themselves. They're not really even that interested. They want to get to know everybody else. They want to know the system, Reflectors aren't really here to know themselves. They're here to kind of be the temperature gauge for the community and to observe and to interact and sample from all these different people. Manifestors aren't really interested in knowing themselves. It's the generator, which is not to even say that we're necessarily interested in it. It's just that this is our lot in life, is to learn what we actually do and don't like. Learn what energizes or innervates us, what vitalizes or, exhausts us. So the generator is here to really learn these things, and this is what brings you true satisfaction. But there's this constant not-self theme of being pulled away from the potential satisfaction or the fear that I will be frustrated unless. There's always the unless, And in your case, with the 3 bridging gates we have, I'll be frustrated unless I know where I'm going, unless I'm strong, unless I'm smart and intuitive. So there can be a strong identification with those things and a yearning for them, just wishing, I did a reading for someone who had bridging gate 52. That was her only bridging gate. And 52 is all about stillness. Well, she meditated for hours a day. That's how much she yearned for stillness and felt that if only I can find stillness, I won't be frustrated. But it's just not true. It's not true. Generators, are deeply frustrated out there in the world. The whole frequency of the world is affected by it. Everyone else is living off our frequency, so there's so much frustration there. And then being a generator, you can have projected channels as well. For instance, you have 2 projected channels, the 4323 and the 3313. And both of those will be bitter when they're not recognized. So there's a lot of bitterness out there in the world too. Even if you're not a projector, you experience that bitterness when those aspects of you are not recognized and when they're not invited. But the frustration level of the world, it's something incredible to realize that there's 4 billion people or more who are so deeply frustrated and doing everything they can to avoid frustration, and it's this cosmic joke or this irony that they're being pulled into situations that frustrate them further with the promise that they'll avoid frustration. So the not-self is this deep aspect of conditioning that's the mental strategies, the mental decision-making, the promises. And when I say deep, what I mean is that it's always there. It's always going to be there. The openness has the potential for wisdom, but that wisdom comes from noticing the ever-present magnetic pull of the not-self. It's not like there's some holy grail moment where the split definition suddenly no longer wants those bridging gates, or where we suddenly no longer want the things of our undefined centers, the themes there. We're always going to want those. Undefined spleen is always going to want that activation of the spleen. It feels so good. Undefined solar plexus is always going to want that emotional juiciness. It's not that we don't want them anymore, or that they lose their hold on us. I mean, in some sense, they lose their hold. They lose their grip on our decision making. That's what happens. But they're always there. And that's the potential for wisdom. The wisdom comes through watching and observing and no longer reacting necessarily. And the other interesting thing, when it comes to split definition, you gain a very specific kind of wisdom. I'm single definition, so I don't really know anything about relationships. Everything I've learned about relationships has been from split definitions. Split definition knows so much about relationships, and it's not that everyone with split definition knows the same thing about relationships. It's always different, and it has to do with the potential for wisdom from the bridging gates. So these same potential dilemma areas, the 34 yearning for power, the 57 yearning for intelligence, the 2 knowing where to go or yearning for direction or drive, these can be problem areas in the not-self, but they can also become wisdom about what makes a relationship fruitful and what makes a relationship satisfying and successful and delightful and all of these things. And so it's not my place to tell you what that wisdom is going to be, because quite frankly, I don't know, and that's going to be something unique that comes out of your own process. But I can generalize that you're going to know about relationships in these 3 areas. So you're going to know the value of, as a relationship, you need to have direction. And as a relationship, you need to be strong. Both partners need to be personally strong and know how to survive. And as a relationship, both partners need to be smart and intuitive. And it's going to be the value of that strength and intelligence and direction in relationships. So it's interesting because these 3 gates, the 2, the 34, and the 57, these start as dilemmas, as this yearning, as this, I need these things, I need to find them, or I'll always be frustrated. And then it can turn into, I need to be them, or I'll always be frustrated. But you don't need to find them, and you don't need to be them. In fact, these are windows into how you view the world and view other people, and learn and gain that wisdom about how to make relationships work. And more than just work, how to make relationships how to make them pleasurable, or how to make them satisfying, or how to make them peaceful, or all the different potential things that relationships can be. And also what destroys relationships. It's learning that relationship didn't have a direction. It wasn't going anywhere. That relationship wasn't strong enough to last. That relationship, they weren't smart about it. They didn't know, they didn't have that intelligent intuition to know how to survive as a relationship. The undefined centers are also deep sources of conditioning. They also pull us away from strategy and authority. Now, for split definition, these are going to be secondary, but they're still going to be present. And there's still going to be magnetic poles that make you, that potentially, now I'm not saying they will, but these will potentially tempt you back into mental decision making. So this is really the struggle. This is the struggle in human design, is maintaining strategy and authority against these pulls, being pulled in all these different directions. And it's like, it's simple, but it's not easy, because if all I have to do as a generator is go uh-huh or uh-uh, wait to respond, well, that's very simple. But what if somebody says, do you love me? And I feel uh-uh. Well, that can be hard. If you have undefined solar plexus, you're not going to want to hurt people. You're not going to want to disappoint people. Or what if someone says, do you want to do, I mean, there's so many different examples, but there's these questions that we get where all we have to do is answer sacrally. All we have to do. And the thing is, the world doesn't end when you do that. I mean, like I was saying earlier, people value that authenticity. It's actually respectful to them. They feel that respect. But the mind is going to, but what if I say this? How are they going to react, and what are they going to do? And it's going to play all these tricks. So looking at the undefined centers, these are the centers where there's going to be particular themes that potentially pull you away from strategy and authority. And they're in a hierarchy. The undefined centers go from strongest to weakest. And your strongest, the strongest not self theme is the ego. So you have undefined ego, so this is going to be the foundation of the not self. Followed by the solar plexus, and then the spleen, and then the weakest not self-conditioning, the least impactful, is going to be the head. So that's going to be what you show the rest of the world. Showing the rest of the world the head there is going to be your willingness to think on their behalf, your willingness to try to solve their problems, to try to answer their questions, to try to come up with, it's basically the not self head theme is thinking about things that don't matter. Well, what this really is I feel this mental pressure, so I'm going to think about it to try to be free from that pressure. So you have a problem, I'm going to think about your problem. Or you have a question, I'm going to think about your question. You're confused, I'm going to think about your confusion. And so that's going to be what you show the world. But that's not the foundation for you. The foundation is the ego. And so the foundation of the ego is, I want love. I want admiration. I want respect. I want approval. And I'm going to prove to you that I'm worthy, and I'm going to improve myself so that I can be worthy. So I prove to myself that I'm worthy. Because I want to be worthy of love, of admiration, of respect, of approval. This is what the ego wants. So again, these work together. So the head is going to be, the ego is, you don't see that. It's not going to be showing that to the world. That's going to be hidden deep down inside. Even I'll prove to you how much I don't care what anybody thinks of me, and I'll prove to you how much I don't care if you approve of me or not, and how much I'm not really looking for love, and I'm doing this out of the goodness of my heart without any desire to be appreciated or admired or respected. It's going to be hidden. But the head is going to be shown. And so that's going to be, I can think about that problem for you. I'll think about that problem. I'll try to come up with a solution, And there's going to be two goals in that. If I think about this, I'll know. That's gate 61, the gate of knowing. If I think about this, I'll know. And then the other is 63, is doubt, is skepticism. And I better think about it because I don't want to get the wool pulled over my eyes. I don't want to be tricked. I don't want to be duped. I have to be skeptical. I have to be suspicious. I have to have my doubts. So I'm going to think a lot about this. And then the 64, that channel is totally open, the 6447. So what you have there is, I have to think about this to make sense of confusion, and nobody else will help me. That's what happens when you have a channel completely open like that. The not self theme of the undefined head is thinking about things that don't matter. Then you have gate 64, which is confusion. and there's no gate 47. The whole channel is open. So what it is I have to think about this because it's confusing and nobody else will help me figure it out. And when the whole channel is open, there's the feeling of being all alone in it, of having nobody else there to help you with it. And there's also the feeling that others just don't get it. There's a lot of denial and there's a lot of blame. So with the 6447, it's, I'm not confused, everyone else is confusing. You know, I make sense, it's everybody else who doesn't make sense. There's a lot of denial, there's a lot of blame. And there's a feeling of being all alone and not being able to trust others. You know, I look at your spleen, I see that you have 4816 completely open. Well, 48 is the gate of depth. 16 is the gate of skills. Well, the undefined spleen, there's a theme of holding on to things that aren't good for you. 48 is going to be its depth, but really it's the depth of solutions. It's having many solutions. So I'm going to hold on to these solutions. I'm going to hold on to this because it gives me depth. I'm going to hold on to these solutions I found. And I'm going to do it even though they're not good for me because nobody else has the skills. I can't depend on anyone else. They're not going to solve it for me. You know? So that's what happens when it's the whole channel. But going back to the head, this is what you'll show people. And it's going to be showing them, I'll think about this for you. And then secretly underneath all that is the heart, the ego. Because maybe if I do this, they'll approve of me. Now looking at the ego, you have only one gate being pointed at, which is the 21. When you have an undefined center and you have an unactivated gate, when it's pointed at, you feel as though you're missing it. It's like the bridging gate. You feel like there's something wrong with you, that you're lacking it. And the deconditioning is realizing there's nothing wrong with you. But that can be a strong, strong source of conditioning. So you have that 21. 21 is about control, and it's about stamina. So the feeling here is, what's wrong with me? Why don't I have the stamina? Why can't I be in control? I have to be in control, but I can't. I'm lacking the ability to be in control. And again, this is going to tie in, all of this ties together. So this is going to be, I need to prove that I can be in control so people will like me, so they'll approve of me, so they'll love me, and then I won't be frustrated. If I can be in control, I won't be frustrated. But I can't, because again, with that 45 pointing at it, you're going to feel like you can't. You're going to feel like you're lacking something there, that you should have it, but you can't. And the stamina. If only I had more stamina. If only I could hold out longer. If only I had the stamina to remain in control, then I would get the love I deserve or I wish for. Then I would be deserving of love, even. You can look at it a different way. Because the undefined ego, it doesn't feel like, it feels undeserving. It's so interesting how it can simultaneously feel undeserving and feeling like it's not getting what it deserves. It's really paradoxical. It's like that 40-37. The 40-37. 40 is all about trust. Well, that undefined ego wants to prove it's trustworthy. If only I can prove how trustworthy I am, then I'll avoid frustration. But it's lacking the 37. So, there's the denial and blame. I don't have a problem being trustworthy. Everyone else has a problem being trustworthy. And I don't have a problem trusting people. Everyone else has a problem trusting people. Can't trust them. I don't have a problem being loyal. Nobody else is loyal. They don't do what they say they're going to do. So that undefined ego, it's this core dilemma around wanting to prove, wanting to promise, wanting to improve. With the 26-44, the 26 is about selling yourself. The 51-25, the 51 is about courage. The worst thing you can say to someone with an undefined ego is, you don't have the stamina, you don't have the courage, you don't have the nerve, you don't have the capacity. That's just going through these 4 gates, the 21, 55, 26, and the 40. And it's essentially that these 4 gates are going to make up what the undefined ego wants to be and do. With the feeling, if only I can be all of those things, I can avoid frustration. If only I have stamina, if only I can have stamina. If only I prove to them how loyal and trustworthy I am. If only I'm courageous. But again, you can see when they're open, like the 5125, that's totally open, that channel. Well, 25 is about innocence. So when it's undefined like that, it's feeling that others don't have that innocence for you, that others aren't innocent, that they have ulterior motives, that they're manipulative, and that they're not going to be there with you when you're jumping into the unknown. And that 2644, feeling that you can't trust others to help you manage resources. It's a tribal channel. So going on to the solar plexus is an awareness center. And so it's about how you see other people. And you have gate 36 activated, which is the yearning for experience. It's a yearning. So it's this feeling that if only you can get the experience, you can avoid frustration. But there's so much nervousness in the undefined solar plexus that 36 is so nervous that it won't be able to live up to the experience. It's afraid of being sexually incompetent, not adequate. It's a fear of inadequacy. And with that gate 30, the fear of the fates intervening, feeling like things will always go wrong, being pointed at by the 41, being kind of persecuted, as it were. That, there's so many nuances to it, but the undefined solar plexus is going to have a tremendous nervousness around others, because as an awareness center, it's looking at others and it's skewed. It's seeing them in a distorted way. I have to be careful not to offend them. I have to be careful not to hurt them, not to rock the boat, because if I offend them and if I hurt them, they're not going to like me. That goes back to the ego. So these stack. The ego wants approval, it wants validation. The solar plexus, it's afraid to rock the boat, and it's afraid of intimacy. The solar plexus keeps people at arm's length. It's kind of the opposite of the spleen in that way. The undefined spleen clings too tightly. The undefined spleen won't let go. Well, the undefined solar plexus won't let you get close, because it's afraid of truth, and it's afraid of the confrontation that would happen if people saw you exactly as you are, with no pretense, exactly, truly as you are. So it's afraid of that truth. That undefined solar plexus is going to keep them at arm's length. It's not going to let them get that close. And then with those open channels, the 1222, the 22 is going to be the fear of silent treatment. If I tell them who I really am, if I tell them how I really feel, they'll shun me. They'll give me silent treatment. The 3740, the 37 is all about affection. If I tell them who I really am, they won't be affectionate to me. They won't care for me. They won't support me. I won't have my needs met. It's a tribal channel. And that's going to be a fear of tradition. Not only a fear of the weight of tradition, but a fear to stand up to tradition, a fear to disappoint people who have traditions by telling them you don't give a shit about their tradition. The 659, that's going to be all about intimacy and friction and this fear of intimacy. But again, with an open channel, I'm not afraid of intimacy. Everyone else is afraid of intimacy. This feeling of denial and blame and that the other is at fault. The 3955, I'm not moody, everyone else is moody. Well, and funny enough, the truth is you're not designed to be moody until and unless the solar plexus is activated. And when it's activated, it can be the most seductive thing. We get hooked on these activations. Someone defines your spleen, you get hooked on that person. You get amped up by it. Someone defines the ego, suddenly this competitive streak comes out. So this is where the wisdom of the undefined centers comes from noticing how malleable we all are, from noticing how when we are in the aura contact with someone else, we are basically ingesting that person. We are taking in their aura and we are affected in certain ways. And if they activate our solar plexus, whether because theirs is defined or through an electromagnetic connection, well, hey, that activation is going to stimulate us in a certain way. And you're going to feel that activated solar plexus. You're going to feel that emotional wave. And it doesn't necessarily mean emotion in the sense of happy, sad, or, it could be, but it could also just be that music sounds better and food tastes better and life gets a little more bright. Or it could be really exciting, or it could be really boring in its own way. I mean, the solar plexus is certain kinds of emotions. It's different from, for instance, the ego. When someone says, oh, you seem really emotional, a lot of times that's the ego, because the ego has its own, it's getting choked up, it's getting heartbroken, it's getting offended. Getting offended is all in the ego. The solar plexus can't be offended. It's the ego that gets wounded. So there's emotion in all the centers, and there's all different kinds of emotion. But the solar plexus, you'll notice that feeling when someone is activating the solar plexus in you, and the particular quality of that. And the same with the spleen. It can feel safe and secure, or you can get afraid. The spleen is the center of fear as well. So these undefined centers, they pull us away as well. They potentially pull us away, and they can potentially become great sources of wisdom as we notice the activation and what it feels like. And we start to notice the magnetic draw. You're a 4-6. The fourth line is your conscious personality line. The more we differentiate, the more we live out our profile and our incarnation cross in its potential. At the most basic, they're just characteristics. So your incarnation cross, the cross of laws, that's just a set of characteristics. It's a set of characteristics of doing things that they don't even have laws for. And so people have to make new laws up to say you can't do them. I think of David Lynch, the filmmaker David Lynch. He's on the cross of laws. And he did things that, since he's done them, people have said, you can't do that. As a filmmaker, you can't do that. And they don't even think to make it a law until he does it. He's like breaking the rules before they are rules. But to really know how that's going to express itself for you as a unique individual, only you can discover that through the deconditioning process, where you become ever more differentiated and ever more unique. And really, we can talk about these things in generalities, but the incarnation cross in particular, as you decondition, as you follow strategy and authority, it swoops you up and it takes over and it begins to guide the life. And it becomes more than simply these characteristics. And then the profile, the 4-6. There's practical advice for a 4-6. I mean, all the profiles have a certain practical guidelines that can help, particularly around the unconscious line, but really both. The fourth line is conscious for you, and the sixth is unconscious. And we typically have more dilemmas around the unconscious line simply because we're not aware of it. I'm a 5-1, and it's easy for me to downplay how important the first line is. I might say, oh, I can handle that chaos. No, I can't. My first line unconscious wants order. It wants stability. But it's easy for me to downplay that. But there can be dilemmas with the personality line as well. The fourth line is really here to transmit. it's here to express, and it needs to be able to transmit or influence to others. And in order to do this, it needs to be really good at that actual moment of transmission. So it doesn't want to bother with the first or the second or the third line processes. It needs to trust that they've already been done. It's not about investigating whether something is true or not. It's not about living it out existentially like the second line does. It's not about experimenting with it and seeing if it breaks like the third line. It's like this thing is already tested and tried and true, and it's already put into practice. It's not a theoretical research like the first line, or putting it into practice like the second line, or experimenting and trying to break it like the third line. It's transmitting it. It is influencing. It's getting it out there. It's externalizing it. It's spreading it. It's a contagion, It's wanting to put it out there. And the fourth line can be tremendously, really influential, tremendously influential. The fourth line can really become pillars of their community who, it's called the Opportunist, but it's not just that you're taking those opportunities, you can provide those opportunities. But in order to do this, you need that strong community. You need that stability. And it's the stability of the social network. So the people in your life become so, so important. And the fourth line is ready to take anybody in. So it's so important that the fourth line only takes in the right people, because it does not have defenses. It's not like the second line that's so defensive and discerning. The fourth line is ready to be the brother or sister of humanity, of anyone. But if all your friends work at a steel mill, you'll end up working at that steel mill. If your friends are criminals, you'll end up being a criminal. If your friends are altruists who are helping the world, then you'll be an altruist and help the world. So the fourth line really, they can only do things that are within their realm of possibility, and those possibilities come from the network. It's so important to build that network, and they gain power as they build that network and as they are stable and strong in it. The advice for fourth lines is always, don't leave your lover until you have another lover. Don't quit your job till you have another job. You've probably heard this. Don't move to a place until don't leave your place of residence until you have another one lined up. And it's really about maintaining that continuity of your network so it can grow. And then the dilemma of the unconscious is that the sixth line goes through a whole phase of making mistakes. It makes mistakes until its 30s, and at which point it's going up on the roof. The Saturn return marks the beginning of the roof phase, but it's a transition. It takes at least 7 years to complete. And then until the Chiron return in the early 50s, there's this roof phase of detachment of, I'm not going to make those mistakes anymore. I'm going to look at how everybody else is doing it, and learn from their mistakes rather than learning from my own. And then there's a real mystery after the Chiron phase, because nobody really knows what can come from that. It's beyond the subjectivity of the third line phase and the objectivity of the roof phase. It's called going on the roof because it's the top line of the hexagram. There's 6 lines, and the 6th line is like a roof if it were a house, right? So going on the roof and coming off the roof, these are the points of dilemma for the 6th line process. And when it's unconscious, it's not really being watched in real time. You see the effects of it, and you look back and go, wow, I guess I was kind of aloof and detached during that time. Or, wow, I guess that was a mistake. And because it's combined with the 4th line, the mistakes of the 3rd line phase are going to be linked to people. It's going to be the wrong people. This is why the 4-6 has a different kind of dilemma than like a 6-2, for instance, or a 6-3. When the 6th line is the personality line, it works very differently than when it's the unconscious, the design. So the 4-6 is going to have dilemmas around the people in their life. And in that first phase, they become deeply pessimistic. And then in the second phase, from the 30s to the early 50s, is the movement back to optimism. And it doesn't always happen. Some people aren't able to become optimistic in that way. But that's the trajectory. And once you've been through optimism and through the pessimism of the third line phase and the optimism of the roof, then you go beyond this binary into living the role model, which is not a role model of any particular type or particular kind of person. It's the role model of you. It's being a role model of individuality, of living yourself as yourself. But again, this is unconscious, and so it's automatic, but it doesn't always go smoothly, and it can be downplayed, how important these things are, how important it is during the third line phase to be able to experiment and make mistakes, how important in the roof phase to be able to watch and observe, and ultimately how important in the post-Chiron phase to be yourself. So there's much more about the 4-6. There's the bonding strategies, being the confidant, how important friendship is as a solid foundation, and the 6th line bonding strategy of looking for the soulmate. There are the various roles. Each profile has 6 roles it plays at the personality level and 6 roles at the unconscious. And these roles are roles that we play as individuals, roles that we play collectively, roles that we play in tribal situations, intimate relationships. These are the masks or the personas that we wear. And there's nothing wrong with these masks. The dilemma is when we get stuck on a particular mask. My collective roles, my collective 5th line role is the general. That's how I externalize or influence at a collective level. That's how I influence strangers. Well, the general gains power during a time of crisis. So if I come to somebody and they're in a time of crisis, I can influence them strongly. But if they're not really in much of a crisis, they might just go, that's interesting, okay. And they might file it away, and then maybe later, if they have a crisis and actually get in that trouble, they might come back to what I said, and it might influence them. And then I have my 1st line externalization influence, which is the authoritarian. Well, I can influence people in areas where I'm an authority, where I have a certain amount of expertise. If I'm not an expert, if I don't have that authority, then I'm not going to be able to get through to them. So understanding the roles of the 4th and the 6th lines, it can help to notice certain dynamics and to notice why certain things work the way they do and don't work when they don't work. But also it can show us where we get fixed, because if I get stuck on being the general and I'm applying that collective role in a tribal situation, ooh, there's trouble. What about authority? I don't need to be an authoritarian at the dinner table or an authoritarian in the bedroom or an authoritarian, I get stuck on a collective role and I'm applying it in a tribal situation. That's not good. So the same thing, the 4th line is going to have certain roles that are going to be important for it to play in different situations and not others. At a collective level, the 4th line is the abdicator. It's meant to abdicate to the collective. It's meant to give in, where if a bunch of people disagree with you and tell you you're wrong, you go, okay, fine, no big deal. But it's not meant to abdicate in intimate tribal situations. And the 4th line is meant to be a companion in tribal situations, to be that companion, to have that strong companionship. Well, it's not necessarily meant to be a companion in the collective situation. You don't need to be everyone's friend. The collective is working with strangers. If you get stuck trying to be everyone's friend and be friendly to every stranger, you get into trouble. So exploring those different aspects, the profile is a mask or a series of masks. The lines show us what these masks are, these personas that we take on. But at the same time, it's not a bad thing. It's not bad. It's not like we're trying to take off all the masks to be the real us. It's it's a better way to express and to live those masks. That's what it's about. All right. Thank you for listening, and I'm wishing you all the best in your process.